If you've got a Bible, turn with me to James chapter 5, verse 7. If not, it will come up on the screen. That's what James says. Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers, an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we consider blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers, do not swear, not by heaven or earth, or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, and you will be condemned. No one will condemn you, sorry. Is any one of you in trouble? He should pray. Is anyone happy? Let him sing songs of praise. Is any one of you sick? You should call the elders of the church to pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well, and the Lord will raise him up. If he has sinned, he will be forgiven. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of the righteous man is powerful and effective. Elijah was a man just like us. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3.5 years. Again he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its crops. My brothers, if one of you should wander from the truth, and someone should bring him back, remember this: whoever turns a sinner from the error of his ways will save him from death and cover a multitude of sin. So here we are, finally, we're at the end of the book of James. And as was stated right at the beginning, we can often read James and use it as a battering ram to beat ourselves up. But James is actually a real encouragement. It's a real encouraging book. And this final section is a real encouragement. And James can be, like I said, can be taken two ways, Carter. And we've all heard the example, haven't we, that, to know what the juice of a fruit is like, you need to squeeze it. And it's only until you've squeezed it when you find out whether it's bitter or whether it's sweet. And James can be quite like that. James is like this book that's saying, listen, life's not easy. There's struggles, there's suffering in this. And when life comes upon and it squeezes you, you can either bear bitter juice or sweet juice. And think about the first sermon war, that the sweet juice will be don't show favouritism, but lift up the poor. If you show favouritism, well, then it's going to be bitter juice. He says that we're from Pastor Lucas, right? Well, if life crushes us in and we start producing some bitter juice, it's going to be idleness. What actually good fruit in this life is to be doing things for the Lord, being active. We heard that actually if life pushes and crushes you in, don't produce sin, but let it produce holiness and godliness in you. We heard that's watch your speech. And life has this way, don't it, that it just encroaches on you and it can make you either go bad or good. And this is the same thing, is that in this section, is that the external things of the world, of life, will affect the internal. It'll affect how you are on the inside. And James's encouragement is, listen, when life squeezes you, let it produce good juice in you, in sweet juice. And it's told us what that juice looks like. Now I feel like in this last part, it's going to tell us how we attain that and maintain this godly living that is being encouraging us to do. And he's broken it down into 3 things. Now, it's just so helpful, doesn't it, when they all start with the same letter? Like patience, perseverance, and prayer. And patience and perseverance are going to come together. Because what he doesn't want anybody to do, doesn't James? He doesn't want them to get caught up in showing favouritism, in slander, in sin. He doesn't want them to get caught up in that. And he says, well, don't look to this world. Like if you focus on this world, you're going to get yourself in a muddle. But what do? He says, well, lift up your eyes and look to the coming of the Lord. Like, what's your way out of this world is to look what is coming back. The time when the Lord comes back and delivers you from all sin and suffering. And keep your eyes on him coming back, because trust me, it's near. He is actually going to come back. So it says in verses 7 and 8, that if you keep your eyes on him, that will help you to live a godly, better life. And we see this, don't we, I was thinking about this, and it's the same, isn't it, for a runner. Now, I've never run a marathon, I never intend to, but I've run quite a bit in my time. And when it's getting hard and it's getting tough, and you feel like you want to break, well, you get told just to finish on the finishing line. You keep your mind on that finishing line and only that, and seek to achieve or get to that, then you'll get through the heartaches or the pains and the struggles of that race. And it's like the faster you run or get to that, it's like the end comes closer to you. And James is saying here, listen, be like that good long runner, the marathon runner who just focuses on the end goal. Like, keep your eyes on the prize. And that's the Lord's return. And then, in the middle of perseverance, between patience and perseverance, he has this phrase where, strangely enough, he says, don't grumble. Don't grumble amongst yourselves. And he's saying, if anything's going to hinder your race in keeping your eyes focused on the Lord, it's going to be grumbling. Grumbling is the thing that you will bring yourself to trip yourself over. And we've looked, haven't we, through all of James. Like I've said, he's had favouritism, he's had tongue, he's had sin, he's had putting your trust into earthly wealth. And grumbling has this effect that if you grumble in church, it'll only throw fuel on the fire that is bad. Like, if you've got envy in your heart and you grumble, trust me, that envy will get worse and worse. And he's saying, cut that out, because if you grumble amongst yourselves, you're just going to make it worse for yourselves. He then goes on to perseverance, and he says, listen, keeping your eyes on the Lord in this long race is not going to be without suffering and struggles. So you need to get this perspective right, that the Christian life is not going to be an easy life. This long race we've got is going to be uncomfortable. We're going to endure pain and suffering. He said, but how do you get through that? He said, well, that's perseverance. That's not taking your eyes off the Lord. That's not trusting in the Lord. Not giving up on hope that he's going to return. And he says, look at Job. Job was hemmed in and pressed from every side. He was rightly squeezed. And he says, well, look at what juice came out of Job. It was the sweet juice, the good juice. And he persevered. And then at the end, look at what God gave him. And sometimes we can think that, not really relate to Job. But it's like, well, what did Job suffer? Well, he suffered physically. He suffered emotionally, mentally, financially. There were death, there were loss, there were loneliness. There were even his identity. Questioning him, are you really a child of God? Who are you in God? And we face that stuff today, don't we? I bet there's not one of them things that is not being faced by someone in here tonight. physically needing, emotionally needing, mentally needing, financially, death and loss and loneliness and identity. And this is James's encouraging words. He said, listen, keep your eyes on that finish line of the Lord coming back and just persevere. When life's squeezing you in, just remember, come away from sin, live in purity, just watch your tongue. Don't show favoritism. Like, don't let the sufferings of this world turn you into this world. But resist that. You know, when somebody is running a far, and I did this not so long ago, it was a long time ago now, probably I did 10 kilometres, and it was not that far in 10 kilometres, but trust me, it takes its toll, and you're kind of visioning that end line, aren't you, like, I've got to get there, but then you get fatigue, and cramps pulls in, and joints start hurting, and you have like these rest stations or refreshment stations, right? You've seen them. There's people on the side like that, giving water out, giving you out a chocolate bag, giving you a water out. And you kind of hit them when you just need them. And you just take them and you get that little boost of energy back again. And that kind of encourages you to keep going on, to suffer for the next part, to keep going. If it ain't for them little rest bites, then you ain't going to work it through. Like, that's what it's there for. And even so much so, there's always people gathered around that are there to encourage you. They're all clapping and kind of cheering you on, and come on, let's go, you can do this, take some more water. And that's how you get through these perseverance or these long races. And now, James is going to say, okay then, this is what I'm telling you to do, right? Keep focused on the end goal and persevere. But now I'm going to give you a refreshment stations. When it gets too tough, I'm going to give you a refreshment station where you can go. Be encouraged and just get rest from it. Because if running a big race, 3 big things that will come against you is cramp, fatigue in your joints and weariness on a race. Well, James is going to say, well, actually, there's 3 things that could hinder your race towards the Lord as well, in persevering and wait for him to come back with patience. There's going to be 3 things that are going to really hinder your race. And he says that in verses 13, he says it this way, he puts them as trouble, sickness and sin. And we can all feel that, can't we? You know, the day that trouble comes is the day that we take our eyes off of the Lord. And we get bogged down in that trouble and we forget to look at the end line. We forget to see that we've got to persevere through suffering. Same with sickness. Sickness is one of those things, isn't it, where we find encouragement when we see somebody sick and still glorifying the Lord. Like, it's such an encouragement is that. And the reason why I find that an encouragement is because I know naturally that's not what I would do. And it's easy to be like that. We know the people who have been suffering really badly with sickness and ill health. And we've got them wonderful examples. We heard that this morning, didn't we? Of Mark and Dorothy, Val, Pastor Phil and Roger Carswell. Having some sickness, but yet still glorifying it and calling people to acknowledge the Lord and being able to pray in that. Like, there's something in about that. And the wonderful thing about James is that he's saying, listen, this is a Christian life. It's not going to be without trouble. It's not going to be without sickness. If you want that life, it's not going to be in this church. In the worldly sense, we try to run from trouble or try to run from sickness We want to avoid it. But James is saying, no, listen, I must embrace that and persevere and keep going to the end. That's what we're called to do. So what are the three things then after? Trouble, sickness, and sin. The last one, sin. He says, and this always does it, doesn't it? The biggest thing that will separate you from your patience and perseverance and walk with the Lord is sin. And we all feel that. You know, this part, doesn't it, says that if one of you says that you're without sin, well, you're a liar. Right? The best thing that we can do is just kind of talk about a sin. James says here, actually confess your sin to one another. Somebody said to me once, you've got to be wise who you share certain sins with, right? But then he says, there's no wisdom at all in not sharing anything with nobody. This is a part of what we're called to be. And he's saying, these are the three things that will slip you up. But what's the encouragement that we see for the runner? What's the bottle of water? What's the energy bar to keep us going? Well, James says it's prayer. He says these are the three things that you'll do when you're faced with trouble, sickness, and sin. And he puts it in three different ways. He says, listen, if you've got trouble, if you are facing trouble, if life has penned you in, well, then you pray. He says, if somebody is sick, well, take them to the elders to lay hands and let them pray for them. Then he says, in fact, if you're caught in sin, sit down and pray for each other. There's these three wonderful examples of prayer. The three antidotes to the trouble, sickness, and sin. And what an encouragement that is. That the Lord has not gone and left us in a mire to fend for ourselves. What a horrible existence that would have been. But it says, not actually in the toughness and suffering of life, do this. Focus on me and pray to me. And do this amongst all your troubles. These last two, well, I would say on that, about prayer, because I've said that about Job, he says that about Elijah, don't he? He has these two great examples of perseverance and of prayer. And he says, look at what happened. Because Job persevered, God answered him and came through. And because Elijah prayed earnestly, God answered that prayer. And he's saying, listen, don't give up what you're doing, because God's going to answer that. God's going to come through in the end. You're not alone. You might feel like you are now. The good news is God's going to come through at the end. And then this last bit. It says, my brothers, if one of you should wander from the truth and somebody should bring him back, remember this. Whoever turns a sinner from the error of his ways will save him from death and cover a multitude of sins. He's speaking to the church here. He's speaking to one of us who sat in this church tonight or at home, who've kind of wandered away a bit from the truth. That could be in James's, where James has looked at people's conduct to each other. Some of us might have wandered away and started having a bit of a slanderous tongue, or being a bit idle, or showing favouritism. Well, James is saying, listen, if someone's like that, bring them back. It might be that some of us has wandered away from the goodness and the truths of the Lord and become ardent to the Lord. Lost all hope amongst troubles, sin and sickness. I've stopped looking towards the Lord. And James says here, actually go to them and help them and bring them back. But there's a flip side to that, isn't there? That if you are one of those people, you are still redeemable. If you have wandered away from the truth in any sense, James's encouragement is this, is that you still can be brought back in. The Lord can still bring you and redeem you back in. That don't let your own sin or behaviour take you away from God, but come back to his goodness. Come back to him. And he says, then what will happen? You'll save him from death and cover a multitude of sins. Like, this whole book has been a tough book to read. You can get to verse end of chapter 5 and you're thinking, man, I can't do all that. I'm never going to do all that. This is so hard. And James said, no, this is the good news. That God's going to come through in the end. Don't lose hope. Don't stop fixating on the Lord's return. And be there for one another in prayer. What a wonderful ending to a book that is. Before we're going to go into prayer, I'm just going to jump back to the verse that encapsulates for me all the verses in the Bible and this one verse in the midst of it. Because we've seen this suffering and sickness and sin and trouble. And that one line, the Lord is full of compassion and mercy. You're not alone in this. We are not alone. But rather, who's amongst us and in the midst of this stuff? Well, a Lord who's compassionate and merciful. The Lord that, it says in Psalm 139, knows us where we sit down and rise up. What a wonderful encouragement that is in the midst of a tough time, of struggles and of suffering. And what I'd like us to do now for a good 15 minutes is them 3 prayer points. That the greatest thing the enemy can do is stop us praying, right? From when we are praying, from when we've stopped praying, we've lost our refreshment station in this walk with the Lord. And he has these 3 prayers, don't he? He said, if you're in trouble or got trouble, well, then you're going to pray. And if you've got sickness, well, then you still need to pray. And if you've got sins, like, confess them and pray for them. And this is a time now where there is a wisdom in what we share, but we need to be vulnerable. We need to push and we need to say where we're at, really, with the Lord. And allow each other to pray. Like, if we don't do this, then we're taking the refreshment station away from each other. And we'll just go out again tomorrow like, man, I can't face this week. But we know we're at this stage now where we can rejoice that, listen, there's a God who's merciful and compassionate. Let's sit down and let's be open and kind of honest. And that's going to take some vulnerability. But what an opportunity to start this next week, right? And miss that. So we'll just take 15 minutes or so and let you know, get around the tables and discuss it. And if you're at home and there's no one there for you to do this, well, think about where there might be trouble or somebody is trouble in life, where you might be caught up in sin or sickness. And just really lift yourselves up to the Lord, or lift up somebody that you know for the Lord. And we'll do that now. I'll come and join the table.